Welcome to Backbone Unlimited. My name is Matt Hartsky. In this episode, I'm bringing you a guest who represents exactly what this brand is about: earning success the hard way, learning through failure, and providing the kind of execution that will always beat luck. Today's guest is Cody Caulkins. He's a New Mexico firefighter, a Backbone Unlimited YouTube subscriber, and a guy who didn't grow up with some polished, perfect hunting resume. Cody is humble. He's really self-aware and extremely process-driven. He's someone who hunted for years, filled tags, and still had the honesty to admit that most of it came down to luck, not stuff that he was controlling. But that changed this season. He was very successful and shared some of his success with me. And through reading the email that he sent, I knew he was somebody that you guys should be exposed to hear some of his story. Cody made the decision this year to stop hoping and start hunting with intention. He planned multiple hunts across multiple states. He embraced the pressure. He passed on animals when most people wouldn't have, and he focused on doing things the right way, from preparation to execution. What came out of that wasn't just a successful season, but a completely different relationship with hunting. This conversation isn't going to be about giant antlers or highlight reel moments. It's more about mindset shifts, discipline, patience, learning how to pass animals, handling pressure on public land, helping others succeed, and finally feeling like you're in control of the hunt instead of at the mercy of luck or chance. If you're somebody who feels like you're close but not quite there yet, this episode is for you. So let's get into it. Cody, with that intro, I'm really glad that you were able to get back on here with me. In full disclosure, Cody and I actually sat down and did this podcast last week, and I failed on the audio. It just wasn't usable. And so Cody spent an hour and a half, maybe a little more, with me last week. And it was a great podcast, but I just couldn't use the footage or the audio. So he was super gracious and decided to hop back on again with me. So it just tells you even more about him that you'll learn throughout this podcast, and another reason why I wanted to have him on. And really grateful, man. Thank you very much for being on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm glad we get to try this again.
Yeah, see if I can get it right this time. We hit record, we're winning. So Cody, with that intro, before we get into the hunts, try to set the stage for us a little bit here. Tell us a little bit about who you were as a hunter coming into this season.
Yeah, of course. So before this season, hunting to me was going and getting groceries. I grew up hunting with my dad. We do dove hunting. We did some elk hunting. It was a family affair, but it was more luck, I felt, than it was truthfully going and hunting. And I'm sure that my dad had a plan, but to me, I was like, yep, my wind's in my face, and we're good, and I'm being quiet. And that was kind of the extent of what my knowledge on hunting was. And it was, let's go sit at spot X and let's hopefully get lucky, and hopefully something just comes across, and we'll shoot it, and we'll fill the freezer. So before this season, that's what my hunting was, and we'd been successful, been very fortunate. But we've had a private ranch that my family has, that we've been super blessed to hunt on our whole lives. But it was a lot of just, yeah, let's hope something walks across us, and let's get lucky and get something in the freezer.
So, you've been filling tags for years, so like not new to hunting per se at all. But you said like you felt like a lot of it was luck. When did you first start to become honest with yourself about that and want more?
Truthfully, it was earlier this past season, with guys at work that I work with, that I talk to, and I was like, yeah, I kind of just go and I hike around and I look, and oh shoot, there's a cow elk right there. Happy go lucky me, and it's cool to have those opportunities and be fortunate and be lucky. But I mean, I didn't know why the elk were there. I mean, that's where they live, and so I didn't fully comprehend why these animals were doing what they were doing, and how to actually get in close to these animals. And kind of whenever I was like, man, I'd rather be lucky than good, but I feel like I'm kind of just lucky.
Was there any particular incidents, that really pushed you to get outside that and decide, because you planned a lot of hunts this year, all of a sudden that weren't involving private land, so what pushed you to finally step outside that private land comfort?
And so this might sound kind of bad. It almost kind of my feelings got hurt. So I with my work, I live with the guys a third of my life, right? We're 48 hours on, 96 hours off. One of the guys I was working with um, at one of my stations, he's a big time hunter. His name's Dalton Martin. He works for Wild Out Pro here in New Mexico, and he was super encouraging on hunting and getting me into it. And I was like, man, yeah, like maybe I should try. Yeah, and he was super encouraging. And he and I were visiting one morning, and I'd already shot two bull elk, and I was feeling like I was successful. And he and I were just visiting, and one guy said, "You're not a real hunter. All you do is shoot elk in your 40-acre high fence." And it kind of offended me. I mean, the ranch is it's 22 to 2,300 acres, and it's not high fence. And I was like, man, I thought I worked hard for these, and I was really proud of that. And I just wanted to prove that one guy wrong, and that was the motivation to get me out.
So when you thought about taking your hunts off the private ground, what did being uncomfortable look like for you mentally?
So being able to hunt on the private ground for the past 10 years, I'd guess, I knew that place like the back of my hand. So it was super easy for me to go out and be like, I know every inch of this property and I know how I'm going to get there and what's going to be easiest. And it was daunting because I've never hunted in the mountains. I'd never gone to where we don't eat mama's cooking at night and or go eat good food at lunch and maybe take a nap in the middle of the day. And so I didn't know what to expect. And it was good that I didn't know what to expect, I think, but I had a lot of encouragement from guys like Dalton and my cousin Nick, who took me out on my bear hunt. It was daunting, but we Nick and I have a good saying: it's what one man can do, another man can do, and that was kind of what helped me just prepare and get through the unknown.
Yeah, that's cool. That's a cool philosophy. How many tags did you draw this year?
So this year I drew a Colorado bear tag, a general season Utah deer tag, the Colorado deer tag, and I had my private land elk tag that I usually acquire every year.
Okay. And then you had some hunts on top of that.
Absolutely, yeah. My buddy got an over-the-counter elk tag for whenever we were in Colorado, in case we saw an elk, we could get good meat in the freezer. My fiance drew a New Mexico deer tag, and she had a private land cow tag with my bull hunt.
Yeah, yeah. That's a lot of tags. So coming from only hunting one area, one chunk of ground, how intimidating was that having all those tags in your pocket?
It was a lot. I definitely think I bit off more than I could chew. I didn't I was just wanting to get boots on the ground and go, and it was big for me. I was like, oh man, all these hunts. I mean, they don't overlap on dates, but they sure are close. I mean, driving one night to get back home to then pack up the truck and leave the next morning for the next hunt was that was a lot. It was kept us busy for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And there's a lot of logistics in there. And with that mindset shift in place, your first hunt of the season was a pretty serious one. So let's start there and tell us a little bit about your Colorado bear hunt.
So for my Colorado bear hunt, I'd always been interested in hunting bear, but I didn't want to hunt bear with dogs. I'd always wanted to spot and stalk an animal, and so my cousin Nick, he had seen bear in a pretty nice spot up in the mountains, and he said, "Hey, let's go hunt these bear. You put in for this tag, we'll go hunt them." And so we took horses up to 12,000 feet, and we got to have the opportunity of a lifetime. It's one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had. Packing in horses, a whole camp, to 12,000 feet for a bear, and even the game warden said, just just a bear? That's why you went all the way back there?" And I said, "Absolutely." I mean, it was amazing. It was 10 miles in. It's kind of a long story, but we saw these people at the very beginning, and we're loading up, and they're wearing helmets and riding riding Frisian ponies up on the mountain. And they said, "Oh, are you guys headed up to this lake?" And we said, "No, we're headed to hunt bear." And they kind of turned their noses up and left, and we didn't think much of it. So we get in there. First evening, I spot a nice elk off of this canyon, and you look over to the left, and there's a bighorn ewe, and then there's a adolescent ram, and it's just massive canyon. And then just the vast, it's unexplainable. It's the most beautiful thing in the world, seeing God's country like that. And we woke up the next morning, and we went fishing, and I'm no fisherman. And I caught a fish, and I looked so happy in the picture that I caught that fish. Man, I have the biggest smile on my face. I had a blast, and I was like, "Man, but we're hunting bear. Like, what are we doing fishing?" But we're having fun, and it was just all part of the experience. And we get back to camp, and we're eating dinner, and I said, "You know what, Nick? Like, this is a successful hunt for me, and I'm so happy that we're here." And we decided that evening, "Hey, let's go look back in that canyon again. Let's see if we can see anything." And sure enough, I see a little black dot, and there's a bear down there. And I was like, "All right." And so we had a shot opportunity, and I chose not to take it because it was getting close to dark. And we decided, you know what, we'll lay her to rest right here. We'll get up early in the morning. We'll hope that bear's here in the morning. And we get up in the morning early. I set my coffee on the stove inside of our teepee, and we get out there, and that bear wasn't 200 yards from where we saw her the night before. And I went to go squeeze a shot off as she was moving, and I missed. It was kind of embarrassing, but it happens. I was shooting a new rifle to me, and I'm used to shooting an old 30-06, and I was shooting a 7mm backcountry. It goes a lot faster, so I definitely didn't need to lead that bear as much. Shot right underneath her neck, and I missed, and that's part of it. And I told myself, well, just try this again. And so got back on the bear and squeezed off another one and dumped her, which was awesome. Took us 3.5 hours to get down to her. We were about 850 feet above her, about 400 yards out, and it was a trek down there with the horses. Made it about halfway and hiked her the rest of the way out. I was on cloud 9. On our way out, we called them the helmet homies. The people that we saw at the very beginning that kind of turned their noses up to us about bear hunting. And I waved at them, and I had the biggest smile on my face, and they kind of just stared. And I was like, whatever. I'm having the time of my life up here in the mountains. We wake up the next morning, and we know that there's a storm rolling in, and so we planned on getting out early. And we hobble our horses, and so we hobbled 2 horses, had one long tied, and had one short tied at camp. And we wake up, and the horses were nowhere to be found. So I get the camp packed up. Nick's going and looking for the horses, and I look out my binos because I have the camp packed up, and I'm looking for these horses through binos, and I'm like, holy cow, I see them. Like, I see horses. Well, it's Nick on a horse, and he's going over the next ridge, and I'm like, oh, that's not good. He's a long ways away. He had found a set of hobbles that were not on the horses. And horses can't unhobble themselves. They don't have opposable thumbs. And so we don't believe that it was malice. We think that somebody just said, oh, these poor horses are stuck, because their front legs are tied together. That's what these hobbles do. They can't go very far with them, but they can still graze. They can still get water. I think that they just didn't know any better, and they let these horses go. And that storm was coming in, so we had one horse, and we took our optics, the rifle, our packs, just our day packs, and the bear, and we made it off that mountain. And that storm was very intense. I'm a religious man, and I don't think I'd prayed more in a short amount of time, watching lightning strike the next ridge over, and I was terrified. But we made it out. That storm unfortunately ended up killing those 2 hunters in southern Colorado. was kind of a big story that I'm sure a lot of us heard about, and it kind of hit home with us. But it was the best experience of my life.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. Most of it, very cool story. Yeah, scary that those folks messed with your horses, especially the way it turned out for those other young hunters. And that could have been a really scary situation for you guys. I mean, it was a scary situation. So yeah, that's really unfortunate. But awesome. Congratulations on the bear. Just a couple of quick points on that bear that I'd like to talk to you about. What gave you the confidence that first night to wait, that told you that was the right call? I mean, because a lot of guys would have seen bear, they're 10 miles in, they've already invested a lot of time and effort into that hunt. What gave you the confidence that that was the right call to wait?
I definitely didn't want to go track something at night, and it's so hard. And I wanted to make the ethical call. It's super tough wounding an animal and not being able to get it that night, especially with how long it took us to get down there. And we didn't realize that it was going to take us 3.5 hours. Um, we figured it was maybe at the most 2 hours. But we didn't want to wound an animal and not be able to recover it, or let let the meat go to waste. So it's kind of what helped us make the right call. And I had already considered the hunt successful. The experience was already there. I didn't feel like I needed to kill a bear to check that box on calling the hunt successful.
Yeah, that's cool. That's a good point because I think a lot of times we get into the mentality that we have to kill, and it can ruin hunts. It can ruin the enjoyment of the hunt for sure. There's just pressure that doesn't need to be there, and we miss the point of it. And especially, when we go hunting for size, that can definitely be true. What did coming back and actually executing that next morning teach you about patience?
We didn't really know what to expect that next morning, and it couldn't have played out any better. It was like, wow, that maybe it's okay to always be a little hesitant. And I understand that sometimes things get rushed. I've rushed shots before and not had a whole lot of time, but it worked out the best way that it could have, with just saying, okay, it's we don't need to kill something tonight. Let's just sit back. It really instilled in my head that sometimes if you just sit back and let things happen, they'll probably work out the way that you want them to.
Yeah, yeah, so true. Yeah, great ending there. One other point I wanted to touch on real quick was the actual shot. So, in my experience, once somebody misses, whether it's been myself, my kids, folks that I've guided over the years, once that first miss happens, it's really hard to recover. Usually, the second shot is not necessarily successful for a lot of folks. Things kind of go downhill. So, what do you think? What was going through your mind? How were you able to stay calm and recover for that follow up shot and make it happen?
So as soon as I pulled the trigger, I knew I missed. And that was so it just sank my heart. I wasn't defeated, but I had told quite a few people, "Man, I'm going on this bear hunt." And nobody likes to say that they missed. It's probably one of the worst, almost embarrassing things that you can tell somebody, "Yep, I missed." And after I shot, it was a miss. And there's nothing that I could do to change that I missed. And I knew that. I knew that I couldn't rewind time. I knew I couldn't just, well, let me try that again. It's all right. Let's just stay calm. You missed. That sucks. But just, I cranked my scope back out, zoomed it out, found her again, and she was, I'm shooting a suppressor, and she heard the hit on the ground right next to her, and it just stopped her, froze her in her tracks. And so I just zoomed the scope out. I took a deep breath and said, "Okay, you missed once. Let's try again. Let's just if you miss twice, it's probably going to be a little bit more embarrassing than saying you just missed once. And so let's just stay calm. It's okay to miss. Just don't make an unethical shot. And I didn't want to wound her. And so I just took a deep breath and got my crosshairs a little low, since we were at such a high elevation on her, and squeezed another one off and it dropped her. And it was a pretty great feeling, especially after, yep, you missed. Before I could even see the bear still standing there, I knew I missed on that first shot. So just taking that breath, and it's okay to miss. Happens. There's nothing you can do to change about it.
Yeah, very cool. I love hearing that breakdown, that composure. Just feel proud of you, as you walked yourself and talked yourself through that, because a lot of people are just, I think they're beating themselves up in their mind, and it takes away from those follow-up shots. And just to hear you walk through that, giving yourself permission that it was okay to miss, and keeping that composure, getting some mechanics down, like taking the deep breath, and just figuring it out and making that great shot, man, is awesome. So way to go. After starting the season with that kind of discipline and success, the next hunt went very differently. So tell us about your Utah deer hunt.
So I drew a Utah general deer tag, and I was ready to kill a big deer. I didn't know what to expect. Obviously, I'm truthfully, I'm getting new into hunting, outside of just hunting on a private ranch, and so this is all new to me. And I was ready to go out and kill a big deer in the mountains, and I get out there and there were so many people. My gosh, I couldn't get away from them. I'd hike 4 miles in an afternoon just to have a side by side go park almost 150 yards away from me, dropping hostess wrappers out. And I'm like, dude, come on, there's not supposed to be vehicles back here. And it was super defeating. I saw a ton of animals though, not deer, but first morning I got within 15 yards of a herd of elk, which was awesome. They had no idea that I was there. The wind was blowing hard, and it was a great experience outside of the people, and it was tough hunt for me. It really was, and yeah, I ended up not shooting a deer on my last day. I There were so many people. I said, you know what? I've learned a lot and I've seen a lot of country. Um, let's. I think it's a good time to go home. And I was checking out some sites that I wanted to see before I left, and just carrying a rifle. And I saw a legal forky and said, you know what? That's. I said bang. He looked at me and I said, that's a successful hunt for me. I learned a lot. It was tough, but definitely not what I expected. A humbling experience to say the least.
Yeah. So I have a lot of folks contact me about hunting out of state. A lot of guys, it might have been their first time, and they want to know more about e-scouting, looking at maps, picking an area. What would you do differently based on that hunt, when you're looking to apply? So if you were wanting to go back to Utah and hunt deer, what would you change about how you looked at the unit you were going to apply for?
I would not only look at the number of deer tags allocated, but also um, how the general elk tags are allocated. So they're over the counter tags, if I remember right. There were a ton of elk hunters there, and it was like driving by a dirt bike race just full of RVs and side by sides at every quarter-mile campground that they had. And I enjoy hunting, but I enjoy being away from people more. And it was a very tough unit to get away from people. Outside of looking at the tags, if I still had that unit, I would have packed in further. I would have tried to done a better job of finding a tougher place to get to. There's probably going to be somebody that's going to outhike me, but it's better than seeing 80 people in one day. So I think those are the two things that I would have done differently. Look at the number of tags and historical number of tags that have been given out, and then try to just get back a little bit further.
Yeah, absolutely. Both great tips. So that patience and restraint that you showed there carried over into your next hunt, where your standards really came into play. So tell us about the deer portion of your Colorado deer hunt.
So for my Colorado deer hunt, there's another buddy of that I work with. His name's John Nelson. He had said, "You need to apply for this unit, man. This is awesome. Like we'll go kill a deer. It'll be so much fun." And I was like, all right, if you say so. It's all private land though. And he's like, no, like everybody hunts the private land. It's not just private land. Like everybody gets permission to hunt this private land. And it was interesting seeing the private land being more pressured than the public land. But we had his kids for the first little bit, and so we'd stick them in the car seats and we'd go drive around and we'd look over a ton of deer. And there were so many deer. I'd never seen so many deer in my life. And there were good animals. There were some great animals that we knew we couldn't get to, but a lot of just nice, mature bucks. And that's what I was after. At the beginning, before we had gone out there, I was like, oh, I want a 180-inch deer. And I was trying to measure inches. And by the time I got there, I was like, you know what? I just want a mature deer. He picked up an over-the-counter elk tag, and so we passed up at least $30 before we started chasing one, and we put one down, and I was so excited to then go chase elk with them. And so that's how that's how my deer hunt went. It was successful. It was fun. 2 days, got a mature buck. It was my first mule deer. I was super happy.
Yeah, awesome first mule deer. And you clearly had standards, while you were hunting those deer, and you passed a lot of deer, over 30, you said. So what advice would you give hunters who struggle with second guessing their standards, and let's say, you got it done in 2 days, but let's say it's 5 days in and you haven't seen the kind of buck that you want, but you still have time left to hunt, what kind of advice would you give those hunters struggling with second guessing those standards and not shooting something smaller than they'd really be happy with?
Truthfully, it's about what makes you happy. I know with Instagram and with social media, and you see these videos of people killing monster bucks all the time, and people are only showing the highlights. You go into Cabela's, you see all the B and C bucks, and I think that's what a lot of people judge what they want to shoot based off of size. And I don't necessarily think it's what makes other people happy. I think it needs to be what makes you happy. If you're happy with killing just a mature animal, if you're that's what makes you happy, then make yourself happy. Be the hunter that you want to be. It doesn't matter about killing the biggest buck. It's cool. Don't get me wrong. I definitely inches are something we all want to brag about, but I think it's just what makes you happy, and being patient is fine. And if you don't see what's going to make you happy, then don't shoot.
Great answer. Yeah, and keeping that in perspective in the back of your mind. Do you think that having kind of that set standard, like you wanted a mature deer, do you think that that gave you more confidence throughout the hunt, because you knew exactly what you were looking for?
Absolutely. It made it super easy to pass up on bucks that, they would be tall and they'd just be super immature. They didn't have a Roman nose. They were young. They were almost frolicking with each other before the rut was starting. They were hanging out with the does, and for me to have the confidence of being like, you know what, I wanted the challenge. I wanted to find a buck that was maybe hanging back a little bit more, just a little bit more mature in his actions. He definitely wasn't the biggest buck that we even saw the whole time. But he was a mature buck, and that's what I was out there for. So it definitely gave me a lot of confidence knowing that this is what I'm gonna shoot if I shoot something, and this is
Yeah.
what I'm gonna find.
Yeah. Perfect. Great. After tagging out on that buck, you didn't go home though, right? You were with your buddy. He had the elk tag, so you shifted roles completely. Tell us about the Colorado Elk Assist and helping your buddy.
Yeah, so the next morning he had that over-the-counter elk tag. We went out to public land, and uh, pretty much first thing in the morning we found elk. We found him about 1,000 yards down into a canyon. We got within about 500, but we never got a true shot opportunity. Um, we had some other hunters that were retrieving an elk on the other side of the canyon, and they kind of boogered these elk out after they had bedded, and that's part of hunting. It was tough. We had them bedded, we had them dead to rights, and just waiting for them to get up. And other people are doing their thing, and it's no fault to them. But so we okay, sounds good. We didn't get these ones, and there were nice bulls in there, and we decided let's try another spot, and we hiked out a little bit, and that next evening we went out to that same spot, and my buddy John was, I want to, like, let's look into this canyon. I was like, okay, sounds good. And he said, where are these elk? Like, we're just sitting there on this canyon. He said, where are these elk? I'm like, I think we ought to check up at this tank, and let's get there before shooting light ends, so that way we can actually put eyes on it and see it and not just look at it at night. And we get to that tank, and sure enough, 300 yards away from us, there's three bulls running through the oak brush, and the oak brush was tall. And he gets set up, and he said, which one do I shoot? And I said, dude, I can't see the one on the left. I don't think the one in the middle's legal. And he said, okay, I'm looking at the one on the right. He's definitely legal. I said, okay. And he dumped that elk, and he was so happy. That was his first bull. He got to put a lot of meat in the freezer for his family, which is why we hunt. Which it was just a great feeling. It was so awesome. It was some work, but it was awesome. I felt like I shot that bull whenever he got that thing down. It was a great feeling. It was awesome.
Yeah, yeah. Any elk hunt, man, is a great thing to be a part of. What does helping somebody else kill an elk teach you as a hunter?
It's just getting boots on the ground, and I felt like as if I were hunting. It was gaining that much experience. It was as if I had the rifle on my back. It might have been a tripod and a spotting scope, but it was new country, seeing new things, learning how these animals act and knowing how they act, and it was awesome. And he made a great shot, so I didn't have to coach him through how to shoot an elk. It was pretty straightforward. It was great learning experience because I felt as if I was the hunter.
Yeah, it's really cool being with somebody else when they're successful like that. It does make it feel like you're just as much a part of it as if it were yours. Sometimes even better when they're super excited about it, and about that outcome and success for sure. How did that experience reinforce preparation and process for you?
It was it was pretty awesome because we prepared for a deer hunt, and being able to shift so quickly into a different species. And you can find deer and elk in the same area. I know that, but it's it's it was a whole different hunt. We went from going on private land where you'd see three or four people on the private land to public land where a little bit harder to get to, a lot more hiking. You couldn't just drive up to the gate and then start walking in to 800 yards to find something. And um, being able to just look that night and prepare overnight for, hey, this is where we're gonna go. This is what we're gonna make this game plan. It made it pretty awesome to be able to prepare in such a short amount of time. And um, having experience with preparing over other hunts in extended periods of time helped me really get that short game plan put together.
Yeah, that is really cool. Being able to transition from the deer to the elk, successful with both. You had to be on cloud nine, and then you shifted things a little closer to home, right? You're going to be guiding somebody who mattered even more. So tell us about your fiance's New Mexico deer hunt.
So this was my first year putting my fiance Kelsey in for hunts. She had an opportunity to hunt cow elk last year. We didn't have a shot opportunity. Weather was uncooperative. We saw 5 elk the whole entire time, but she enjoyed the hunting aspect, and she said, "I'm ready for more." So I put her in for some hunts in state, and she drew a New Mexico deer tag, and I was very happy for her. And it was a tough hunt. We didn't see many animals. It was warm this year. It was a migratory hunt, and so we're waiting for these deer to come out of Colorado, and they were not moving. It was a little discouraging, and she stayed super positive the whole entire time. It was pretty impressive to see that. She got a little under the weather, I think, from lack of sleep, because we were getting in late and getting up early, and we were hiking in and having some troubles. There's one entry point for the unit that you can walk in. There's no motorized vehicles. We'd hike in, and here comes an e-bike. And man, we're like, man, we're trying hard. We're hiking hard, and we decided that I was looking kind of where we wanted to go, and I said, "Oh, hey, I recognize that name on Onyx." And so I got a hold of the guy who his property butts up to the edge of this management area, and I said, "Hey, would you mind if we park at your place? That way we can cross in and maybe get away from people a little bit more." And he said, "Absolutely." And that was the best. That was the best bottle of whiskey I've ever bought for him, because it made it worth it. And we got her first mule deer down one evening walking back to the truck, and she we we saw him, and I said, "Hey, he's a buck. Do you want to shoot?" And this guy doesn't know that we're here, and he was 36 yards from us by the time she shot, and it was an amazing opportunity. It was her first mule deer. She was on cloud nine. I was super happy for her, and I was super proud of her sticking through it, even though she was definitely tired and not used to the long hours of boots on the ground. It was an amazing experience for the both of us. I was super proud of her.
Very cool. Really cool thinking outside of the box, and being able to come in from a different direction. It's not something that I would have always done. My kid has helped me get a lot better at that, thinking outside the box and figuring out ways where we can get more remote, rather than just thinking about one entry and that's it, and then just having to hike further. So that was pretty cool. Was there any other point during the hunt where you felt like you had to change up the strategy and try to figure out how to get her a buck?
Absolutely. So that morning, before we shot her deer, so we shot her deer that in an evening hunt, but that morning, it was eating away at me of why aren't we seeing deer? It didn't make sense to me, and it wasn't getting through my head. Why are we not seeing deer? And so I got on YouTube and I was watching one of your videos, and it's just how the mule deer were operating, and I said, okay, I know we need to get to where the aspens are. That's where these deer are going to be living right now, based off of the weather, and that's what stuck with me. And I said, okay, if we can find that and maybe just get a little refresher on how the mule deer are working, and that 3 a.m. YouTube video really kind of helped guide us to where we were gonna go that next morning. I knew we were gonna enter in off of that guy's property, but I didn't know where we were gonna go from there, and that really pointed us in the right direction. And we saw we saw one buck that we didn't get a shot opportunity on, but it was awesome seeing him. And we saw two does, and I was like, perfect. We are in the right spot now. We finally found deer. That was that was a game changer. That was kind of the turning point of that whole hunt. Was that 3 a.m. YouTube video?
That's cool, man. That's really cool to hear that. I remember reading that in the email that you'd sent me in your hunt recap, and so super rewarding to hear that helped a little bit. But it's still on you to do that research, to figure those things out, to adjust for her, and just, man, that coming together like that, being able to help her is just so cool. You know, what do you think is harder, being able to or having to try to execute your own hunt, or trying to stay patient while it's somebody else's hunt?
For me, it's definitely somebody else's hunt. That's the harder one for me. And it's not necessarily because the hunting is harder, but it's because I care more about seeing other people being successful and happy, and I almost feel obligated to get them that success, or to contribute towards that success. Whenever it's my own hunt, it's kind of just meh. It's my hunt, um, and I don't want to. If somebody doesn't want to do something, that's their tag. But I definitely want to contribute towards their hunt, and it's a lot harder on me mentally to make sure that they have a successful hunt than if I don't have a successful hunt. I can be okay with failing myself every once in a while, but I don't want to fail others.
Yeah, and that says volumes about you. I feel the same way, especially like when I'm trying to help my kids, for instance. I obviously I'm trying to think about the thousand things that I need to do right while I'm hunting for myself, and all the principles, that I try to pass along through the YouTube videos and content. But when it's somebody else, man, it's that much more stressful to try to make sure everything's perfect. I when I helped my youngest son get his elk this year, uh, we had spotted that bull from probably about 3 miles away. And when you get across a canyon, you actually get into the hike and the stalk. Everything looks so different. Okay, is this the finger he was in, or is it one more over? And we just ended up having to. We traveled so long sneaking one or two steps at a time and glassing because I wasn't 100% sure where that bull was located. And so we just kept picking our way and picking our way. Where if it was myself, I probably wouldn't have been, quite as picky about the pace as soon as we were. I'd have kind of slipped up over the edge and still been cautious, but there probably would have been a lot more chance of blowing that elk out. And the way that it was perfect when we finally came upon him. He was bedded down in some aspens on a really windy day, and we saw him from about 300 yards above. And if we hadn't been going super slow, even though we started way too soon, we probably would have bumped that bull. So I agree. It can be definitely stressful when you're out there on somebody else's hunt trying to make it perfect for them. How do you balance that coaching piece without being over controlling?
Definitely think it's me trying to stick with the original plan. Whenever I would talk to Kelsey about, hey, this is what we're gonna do, so that way you know where we're going. You kind of have an idea of what's on the table for today, and instead of just being like, no, we're gonna go this way, and she's like, well, I thought we were gonna head up the ridge, not go down into this canyon. It's I think that was definitely how it was difficult for me to balance it, but it made it a lot easier. And even on her elk hunt, whenever I'd say, "Hey, this is what we're gonna do," and not just, "Yep, we're doing this. Let's go." It was, "This is what we're gonna do, and this is why we're gonna do it." And helping her understand, like, "Oh, okay, the wind has shifted. That's why we can't just bump over this next ridge, is because our wind is wrong." And so being able to just give an explanation and not just uh, an action is kind of the best way to balance that for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that communication and setting those expectations is really important. Another thing that you had mentioned to me before was really staying focused on Kelsey having fun, and showing her the enjoyment of the hunt without putting too much pressure on her. I think as a dad, like that's one thing that I've really struggled with over the years because we want to see the other person be successful more than we even want to be successful ourselves. And so that can really ramp up the pressure, and that's something that they feel. But I felt like what you described to me was, really having a focus on making sure Kelsey was having fun.
Yeah, absolutely. It was her tag. It wasn't my tag, and that's something that I definitely needed to let resonate with me because I wanted her so bad, like you said, to be successful, and you wanted, and just how you wanted your boys to be successful with their hunts, and but it was her tag. And if she didn't want to go out on a morning, I wouldn't have said, "No, you're going." It's okay, this is your tag. This is your opportunity to enjoy the opportunities that we get to experience in life. And if you want to eat a ham sandwich while we're on a ridge because it's a pretty view, then let's eat a ham sandwich on a pretty ridge because it's a great view. It was her tag, and I wanted her to feel success just outside of the kill. I wanted her to enjoy the experience, and that's something that was a little tough at points because she was like, "Oh, I like this little area," and I'm like, "Okay, perfect. If that's what you want to do, then this is your tag. Do you want to do this, or do you want to hike another 3 miles?" And a lot of times she'd be like, "Man, 3 miles might seem like a lot in a really short amount of time. Maybe we can just enjoy the moment and enjoy being together and enjoy being on a hunt." So it was her tag to enjoy.
Yeah, that's an awesome perspective, and one that is probably going to help you have a happier, longer marriage as well. So it's great that you have that perspective at your age. That hunt in particular rolled right into one of the biggest chapters of your season. So tell us about your New Mexico elk hunt for both you and your fiance and your bull.
Absolutely. So we each had a tag on the ranch this year. She had a cow tag and I had a bull tag. We had made a game plan for that first morning, and we had some other hunters that were going to be joining us, and so I had given them a spot to go to, entering it on the west side of the property, and Kelsey and I were entering it on the east side. I knew that if we didn't see elk in the first meadow that we arrived to, that we were just going to bump up and we were going to try to find elk and more towards the center portion of the property. And so we're hiking along, and I before we break through the tree line, I kind of set her down. I said, "Hey, what we're going to do is we're going to break through this tree line real slow, nice and easy, and we're going to look out into this opening, and we're probably going to see elk out here. So just be ready to stay calm. We'll get your rifle up, we'll try to get you a shot opportunity." And my goal before the hunt was to have her fill the tag. Since we don't buy red meat at the store, hunting is how we fill our freezers, and cow elk are usually a little tastier than the bulls. And I wanted her to have her first cow elk. And so we get to this little opening, and I go pull up my binos, and out of the corner of my eye I see some ears, and so I just kneel down. She kneels down with me, just like we had talked about in practice, and I said, "Hey, there's elk. They're gonna be coming in. They're about 200 yards away. They're coming towards us." And she gets ready, and she stays super calm, and she had opted to not bring her shooting sticks that morning. Um, which she then was regretting. She picked up her 7 mag, and she was definitely nervous. And these elk got about 100 yards from us, and I said, "Do you want to rest?" And we were kind of sitting there almost chit-chatting with each other, like, "Hey, like, let's shoot one. You shoot the first elk that steps out." And she's anxious, and she has a ton of adrenaline running through her, so I tell her, "Hey, rest your rifle on my shoulder and squeeze one off. Shoot that first cow that steps out by herself with no one behind her." And she's sitting there. She's like, "There's a nice bull with him. You shoot the bull." And I'm like, "No, we're shooting a cow elk right now. We're not shooting bulls." And he was a nice 5 by, but he was very young. He was immature in my eyes. He was real spindly, just a young bull. And I was like, "Yep, that's okay. We're shooting a cow elk right now." And she squeezes one off, and man, it felt like a 10-year-old hit me in the back of the head with a baseball bat and spun me around 3 times and told me to find elk. It was so concussive on her shooting off of my shoulder, but she made an excellent shot. She was like, "I see blood." I said, "Okay, let's just stay calm. Did you see it go down?" She's like, "Well, I saw the elk go behind this little grouping of trees, and I didn't see the one with blood on it come out." I said, "Okay, we'll wait here." We went up 15 minutes later, started going where she shot that cow at, and that cow wasn't 20 yards from where she shot. It was an incredible experience having her shoot her first elk. She gutted it all by herself. I was super proud of her. I have an amazing picture of her with the biggest smile on her face with a knife, and gutting her first elk. It was an awesome experience. So after we transferred from that, I started focusing on my bull tag. We went over, we crossed the fence to a neighbor's property, and I had seen the biggest bull elk I'd ever seen in my life, and he was just on the wrong side of the fence. And I was admiring him and thinking about the elk that I could have once shot maybe at one point if he was on the right side of the fence. I turn around, and there's a small bull standing behind me, and I was like, "Oh, maybe I ought to focus on what I'm able to shoot, not dreams of shooting something that's on the wrong side of the fence." And so I pan the trees. I find a couple more elk, and so I lay down and get set up, and I was trying to decide if this elk was a shooter bull or not, and I was like, I don't know, and kind of going back and forth in my head. And behind him, I saw another bull, and the other bull was broken, but he was more mature, and I could tell that he was more mature. I couldn't necessarily tell how big he was inch wise because he was moving through the trees. I saw that he was broken, and I saw that he was mature, and that's what I came there to shoot. And so I squeezed a shot off at about 500, and got a good hit on him, and put another one in him as fast as I could, and had two well placed shots, and had a nice bull down. And it was super nice because I passed up, ended up being six bulls before I ended up pulling the trigger on one. And he wasn't the biggest, but it was super awesome filling other people's freezers, filling my own freezer, and having a mature animal down.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Both of those sound like really rewarding hunts, and I wish we would have paused after her hunt just to congratulate you, if nothing else, just on the patience that you showed, and the patience she showed, and shooting without any kind of, you know, formal rest, and being able to keep it together and have her shoot off your shoulder, and just the whole thing was just really cool, and how excited you were for her. You've said before that this was the first time you felt like you were fully in control of a hunt. And what does that mean to you?
I knew I was going to find elk. I wasn't basing it off of I'm going to sit here and hope something comes across. I knew about every single time that I went out that I had a very high likelihood of finding elk. I was understanding how they were working as a species. I was understanding the terrain more. I was understanding how thermals work, and I was understanding the reason why hunters do things. That's why I felt in control. I passed up on, there were in the group of elk that my fiance had shot her cow out of. There were two legal bulls, and I'd passed up on those, knowing I could go find more elk. I can go find more elk. I know I can do this. I passed up on a small bull, and he was a long ways out, and I had him ranged at 700. I was ready to go, and it's a long shot. It's a super long shot for somebody to take, and I don't like shooting things in the evening at a super long distance, and so I passed up on that one again, knowing I can find more elk. Um, Passing up on the bull that was 100 yards behind me, I knew that there were going to be more elk, and I knew I could find something mature, and so that really helped me go through everything. And passing up on the very last bull that I didn't shoot, it was truthfully only because I had seen a larger, more mature animal behind him. So I definitely felt in control, knowing I can find elk and not just I hope elk come by.
When that connection finally starts to happen, and you realize that a lot of the same principles are true over and over and over again about this animal. It changes it from that animal being this mystic, mythical creature, with all these crazy tendencies that we don't know anything about, to really building our confidence that, there are certain things that they do pretty predictably. And it's cool to hear that confidence come out in your decisions. You have mentioned that this bull for you meant a lot more in a lot of ways than even some of the bigger bulls that you've killed before. Why do you think that is?
I think it's truthfully because I knew that he was a mature animal, and that's what I was out there to get. And I've shot larger bulls than him, inch wise, but it felt awesome knowing that I passed up on other animals that were not as mature as him, and being able to take the more mature animal that I had seen. Um, it meant a lot to me being able to understand these animals, and yep, this is why I got that animal, is because I understood them, not because I got lucky and had a nice bull walk out in front of me. It meant a lot feeling that, as we just talked about, being in control.
Yeah, absolutely. That's cool to hear. I want to try to transition now from your hunts awesome season, a lot of animals down, a lot of great experiences, whether there were animals taken or not, just great hunts. And let's transition and talk about some of the takeaways from your season, a little bit of reflection time. What was the biggest mindset shift you experienced this season?
It was the humbling experience after that Utah deer hunt. Man, that was after being on cloud nine of going into the back country and having the craziest story to tell of horses getting released, maybe not taken, but released, and getting out of there with a bear to going to a place where I was what a lot of people consider unsuccessful. It was so humbling knowing that I was not doing great. I was struggling almost, and I was learning. That was the biggest shift for me was that learning experience, and that's what I like to call it, and that's why I think that hunt was successful.
And I think that that's probably something that you're going to carry with you forever, just knowing who you are is that learning mindset, and when we're out there, if we're always in that learning mindset, it just changes the way that hunt hits, and you just tend to get more out of it. I think when that's the perspective and you're just not so caught up in the pressure of all of it, so that's cool to hear. What decision are you the most proud of from your season?
Definitely passing up that bear the first night that we had a shot on her. That was I was super super happy with how that worked out. And it was a tough call, but I'm very proud of making the tough call.
Yeah, yeah, that was a good call. What mistake did you avoid that you might have made in the past?
Ooh. I feel like my whole mindset on hunting has changed. In the past, I would have been a lot more aggressive and not so patient. I would have rushed things a lot more. Um, where this year it was definitely breaking things down a little bit more, being a little bit more patient, taking just a little bit more time before you shoot. And I definitely think that rushed shots, and I haven't had anything really bite me that I've felt super guilty about, with wounding an animal or anything like that. But rushing shots has been something that has happened before for me, and I didn't have any shots this year that I felt were rushed, and that was something that I definitely avoided this year was rushing shots.
Yeah, cool. Great areas there. How has your definition of success changed because of this season?
So I used to define success as notching that tag, filling out my harvest report and checking the yes box on did you harvest an animal. Um, and I definitely don't think that that's what hunting's about. Um, for a lot of people, it is, and I understand that putting meat in the freezer is important, and it's super awesome to kill a big animal. But having the experience and being able to get out and see the country and make great memories with family and friends is, I think that's what makes a hunt successful. Is having that smile on your face and being happy with having that experience and having that opportunity.
Yeah, I love that definition of success. When you look back on how you prepared for the season, how do you think, whether it was e-scouting or watching YouTube videos or talking to buddies, whatever it was, how do you feel like preparation changed how you were able to handle the pressure?
Truthfully, just having the, I'm assuming you're talking pressure as in the pressure that I felt on myself and not hunting pressure, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, definitely having people in my corner that motivated me to hunt. It's tough because a lot of people want to gatekeep the information in the hunting world, and they want to be like, "Oh, you're not as good of a hunter as I am, and my uncle Bob and I are the best hunters that ever walked planet Earth." And it's super nice and refreshing to know that I have people like Dalton who helped me out a bunch, and my cousin Nick who took me out on my bear hunt, having John show me around in country that I had never experienced, and being able to do that, having guys like you who post videos on how to hunt, how to understand these animals, and not just gatekeep information because they want to be the hunter. It's kind of an interesting dynamic that our society is in the hunting world. It's a lot of guys want to gatekeep that information. They aren't going to tell you, oh, this is a good spot to go. This is how we filled our tags. This is how we're gonna go about these animals. It's like, oh no, it's fine. You just don't know how to hunt. I can maybe show you someday. And so I think that's how preparation changed for me handling pressure. It wasn't necessarily anything that I did, but it's what others did for me.
That kind of growth that you absorb there, it doesn't just stop after one season. So I see that as something that you're going to continue to be the kind of guy that absorbs that, seeks it out. And I know next season is going to be a little bit different for you because you've got a wedding in the fall, but not in terms of animals, but in terms of development. What are your goals for next season?
Well, I definitely am wanting to get out and hunt. We plan on hunting elk again this year. Um, and harvesting an animal is going to be awesome. I am hoping that I get to experience something new. Just one new thing would be an awesome thing to either learn on, to experience, to reminisce with my grandchildren on. That's my goals for this next season is to learn something new and to experience something new. We obviously would love to kill a cow and we'd love to kill a bull, but it's pretty broad of just I just want to learn one thing new, and I think maybe we might be able to learn that. Nick has a ibex hunt coming up here in February, and so that's probably going to be hopefully our great learning opportunity.
Yeah, more learning and more experiences, man. You can't ask for much more than that. How do you feel like this season has changed in the way that you want to plan and prepare and train in the future?
It definitely changed from being able to go to a house every evening to being in the backcountry, having everything set in your pack and having all the right equipment and not forgetting simple things like your extra knife or, oh shoot, I forgot stakes. Like it's definitely, that was an eye opener for me, being able to have to make a list and, okay, I can't forget any of this stuff. And with training, I feel like I'm in fairly good shape, and it was definitely something that I was prepared for, but I could definitely get some more time in the saddle and maybe a little bit more hiking time so that my legs aren't jello on day number 3.
Yeah. Yep. A lot of that only comes from learning what that's like, for sure. You set a lot of standards for yourself this season. So I'm curious, like, what standards have become permanent for you now going forward?
For me, I think my standard for myself is shooting mature animals and being more of a conservationist than a trophy hunter. Um, I think I need to prioritize the happiness of my hunt and not the happiness of the Instagram picture that I can post. That's the standard that's going to be permanent for me is making my hunt happy for me and not a, a highlight reel.
Absolutely. That is a great one. I want to tie a little bit of this in and be a little bit selfish and kind of talk about the connection that you had with Backbone because you've mentioned using the videos a couple of different times. What did structured learning and preparation actually give you this season from some of that connection?
Man, it was just a game changer on being able to understand the animals. I growing up it was okay, we have to be quiet. Okay, let's kind of make sure the wind's in our face. But that was about it. I didn't understand how the animals worked. I didn't understand how the terrain affected the animals and how the terrain worked. I didn't know that those two things coincide with each other so well. I thought elk and deer were just there because that's where they are. Um, that structured learning definitely pointed me in the right areas, gave me a plan A, B, and C, and a confident plan A, B, and C. Not just a, well, hopefully we go here, and if we don't see anything, then we'll go here. It's, okay, if this happens, this is probably why. Let's move over yonder. So that's how that structured learning definitely gave me preparedness.
Just power. Absolutely. What would you tell other hunters who feel like they're close, they're close to more success, they're close to finding more animals, they're close to killing more animals, but they're still relying on luck?
Definitely suggest for new hunters, even I suggest all the time learning how these animals work and learning how the terrain works. Your videos break it down amazingly. And it was something that whenever I found it, opened up a whole new world for me. It wasn't just, oh, cool, I'm watching some guy kill a monster Gila elk because he's in the Gila. It was, okay, this is how these animals are working across different terrains across the whole country. That's definitely what helped me transition from, well, I hope they walk across here to, cool, I'm going to go to this area because of this reason. I think that's what I would tell people to help them get out of that luck phase.
If somebody's listening and they're kind of on the fence about really diving in, preparing seriously all the way around. Your fitness is kind of taken care of because of your job, right, with the firefighting. But a lot of guys wait until a month before they really start thinking about it, because it's uncomfortable, or maybe they don't shoot enough, or maybe they don't spend enough time e-scouting, or they're overwhelmed from, all the terrain terms, and they don't understand all that goes into it and how that correlates with wind and where those animals are hanging out, or what an animal actually needs to really call an area home. If they've kind of been on the fence about that investing into all those areas sooner, what kind of message would you say to those folks?
I would suggest if you're interested in doing it, then give it a shot. A lot of people get too in the weeds of having the most expensive gear, but just going out and getting boots on the ground, getting a tag, and seeing if it's something that you enjoy. And if it's not, then that's okay. We don't all need to do the craziest backpacks into the gnarliest canyons and up on the highest ridges. But if it's something that you're interested in doing, give it a shot and learn a little bit more, do a little bit of research, but it's not gonna make or break you if you don't enjoy it. Don't let other people's judgment of what you're gonna do dictate whether you're gonna commit to a hunt or commit to this lifestyle.
Yeah, those are great points. I have guys reach out to me all the time and want to know, like we drew Idaho elk tags last week, and you know, I've been getting message after message, guys wanting to know, if they could tag along, or even if they weren't going to hunt and experience that with us. And that's something that's very personal to my son and I, and so there's a lot of reasons why that probably wouldn't work. But I encourage them to get out there themselves. Even if it's not a perfect draw area. Maybe it's some kind of lesser tag through a leftover license or whatnot, and just get out there. But a lot of guys don't want to go if they aren't going to be successful. They don't feel like their chances of success are high enough. And like you said, I think that the most valuable thing to do is get out there and get boots in the dirt. You're not going to learn just sitting at home. You're going to learn by far the most valuable information just getting out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Cody. Well, man, this has been a great conversation. I don't want to take up any more of your time. I would love it if people had some access to you. If folks want to reach out and get a hold of you, how should they do that?
Of course, we can put maybe my email in the description of this, and feel free to reach out. And I'm located in New Mexico. Let me know if you guys have any questions. I'd love to hear from you.
Perfect. Yeah. So we'll put Cody's email in the description, in the podcast, and on the YouTube description so that you guys can reach out to him and he can kind of filter stuff that way rather than just giving out a social media blanket or something. So, yeah, thanks again, Cody, man. Congratulations on an awesome season. Awesome season for your buddies and for your fiance. Some really great stories and learning experiences. Always great to meet another humble hunter, eager to learn, and eager to share their knowledge and experiences. So there's so much I appreciate about you, and thank you for getting back on here and doing this podcast over with me.
Of course, thank you for having me, and thank you for everything that you do for our community. Our hunting community thrives because of people like you. So thank you.
I appreciate that, buddy. Looking forward to more conversations with you and some hunting down the road here. So best of luck on everything you have coming up with the wedding and your 2026 season. And I'll be talking to you soon.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Thank you guys for watching. Appreciate you being here. Your support means the world to us and allows me to keep cranking out information. So until next time, train harder, hunt smarter, and never settle.